Okay, so if I can just do a quick introduction uh, to Joe. Joe, I'm sure you want to introduce yourself, uh, but we're super excited to have you here. Joe's been to a couple of our sessions before, and I asked him if he what he does, and he said he's a content designer, and I went, "What is that? I've never dealt with that myself. Sounds really interesting. Let's learn some more." And he said that he's worked with Figma before, and that he's been doing some work around content design in Figma and how you collaborate and that sort of thing. And I said, "Oh, that sounds like something that the gang would probably love to hear about in a session." So we're super stoked to have you, and we've got a bit of an agenda of like, Joe will give us a bit of a spiel, and then we'll do an activity together. Um, but we're super casual, so if you want to ask questions, or either in real life or go into the chat. It's totally cool. But I'll let you talk, Joe. This is your baby now, so have fun.
My baby, I love it. All right, thanks very much, Mitch. Yeah, and it's great to be able to speak about content design today because it's especially with Friends of Figma, because it's something that I'm very passionate about, and yeah, I'm hoping that everyone that joins the session, that everyone that watches it subsequently leaves feeling a similar passion as well, for this topic. And I hope you enjoy it and come away from the session with something. So I guess before we get started, what I'd be really curious to know is how many people here are content designers or UX writers? Maybe just give a quick show of hands. No content. Okay, we have one content designer. Very good. And I was just wondering, where is everyone based? Is everyone based in Ireland, or are you distributed in different locations? Does everyone want to speak?
Ireland here, Dublin, in Ireland.
Yeah, I'm Dublin as well.
I might be the odd one out. I'm in Belfast in the north.
I'm in Wexford.
Okay. Are you still on the island of Ireland, though?
Yeah, still Ireland.
Yeah. So I'm also based in Ireland. I'm not based in Dublin, even though this is Friends of Figma Dublin. I'm actually in the west of Ireland, and it's a beautiful area, not quite as built up, but yeah, that's good to see where everyone's from. So I'm assuming the rest of the people that aren't content designers are probably going to be either product designers or product managers or work in engineering. So this chat is going to be about basically what is content design, how to collaborate with content design, and it's for people who are just starting out in content design, but it's also for people who might be interested in getting into it, and it's also for people who, let's say, they do design themselves but they don't have a content designer in their company, and maybe they have to do a little bit of it themselves. So yeah, let's get into it. Okay, so I just thought as maybe a quick icebreaker, we'd start with a funny message that can basically just give us a gist of why content design exists in the first place. So yeah, this is taken from like quite an old-fashioned program. An internal error occurred while showing an internal error. Great. You're recommended to exit the workbench. Subsequent errors may happen and may terminate the workbench without warning. See the log file for more details. Do you want to exit the workbench? Well, probably yes, after seeing that message, and never go back. And yeah, the message on the right, you'd probably normally read it as keep calm and content, but today I've switched the verb to a noun, or sorry, the noun to a verb, and we're going to read it as keep calm and content. So I think before we start to actually talk about what content design is, and also collaboration with content design, we need to really think about what content itself is. So now I want this to sort of be like an interactive session. So I was just wondering if anyone could like volunteer what they believe content to be. Any volunteers?
Me, the words in your design.
Okay, the words in your design.
Can I give it a go?
Yeah, sure.
The stuff you're there to see.
The stuff you're there to see. Okay, very important. The visual part. Okay. Anyone else?
Yeah, the stuff you're there to consume, rather, whether that's audio or text or video or pictures.
Brilliant. Yeah. And that's exactly it. So it can be text in the design, it can be GIFs, it can be illustrations, photos, videos, charts, basically anything that you can consume through the senses. So that even extends to sound, right? So I suppose the next big question is, what exactly does a content designer do? So we know what content is, what does a content designer do? So what's really important to a content designer is information and communication, right? That's basically it. It's looking at information that the user will consume, how that information is communicated to the user, and how it's presented. So yeah, looking at the responsibilities of a content designer, and this is a joke, by the way, right? So we're not just into firefighting and you know, solving bad engineering problems, etc. You know, or at least we shouldn't be. A content designer's main responsibilities, right, are probably best contrasted with that of a product designer. So a product designer is responsible for the final design of the UI and its elements, and the overall UX user experience as well. Whereas the content designer is responsible for the information in a user flow, along with how and when that information is communicated to the user. And this is vital to the user experience. So whether it's information that helps the user perform a task, or whether the user is coming to your product for the information itself, a content designer will ultimately be in charge of such information. However, someone mentioned before that you know, content design is like the text in the screen or the UI copy, but that is true. But the value of content design actually goes even deeper than that, and so too does the work of a content designer. So a lot of content design work actually happens behind the scenes as well, and is more oriented towards long-term growth and long-term improvement of the user experience. So content design plays a huge role in research, as well as content testing for usability. Content design also involves working on content strategies, which also contribute highly to the information architecture. Content design is also responsible for creating and maintaining style guides. They also tend to champion inclusivity and accessibility in both product and an organization and their culture. Many times, also depending on the company. So if it's a really large company, or if it's a company that's on the international stage, they will be the bridge between product and localization. They also often work with the design system to ensure that any UI copy that exists in design system elements follows style guide rules. And content design is also often responsible for maintaining a term base for consistency. So digging a little deeper into that, when it comes to accessibility, this plays an important role in content design, and we look at both legibility, readability, but we also factor in assistive technology. So this is just to kind of show like the depth of thought that goes behind the copy that you see on the screen normally, and in any digital product that you interact with. So when it comes to legibility, we want to see, is there like adequate color contrast between the font and the background? Is the text readable by people of varying backgrounds, age, education level, and mother tongue as well, because their mother tongue might not be English. We also want to use clear and concise language and steer clear of any jargon, which also includes any internal jargon that we might use, which sometimes finds its way into a product UI copy. And we also have to bear in mind assistive technology when we're producing content. So we need to know how screen readers reproduce text, and how special characters such as ampersands and even slashes or sometimes hyphens can impact the reproduction of this for people who can't see. And we also need to ensure that video and sound content has captions and provide alt text for images. So like that describes images basically for people who can't see the images, or if the images can't load due to places with poor internet connection. So these are just some examples of how we have to factor in accessibility. But that's not the only thing. We also have to champion inclusivity as well. And that means using culturally sensitive language that avoids any stereotypes or assumptions, includes gender neutral pronouns, avoids ableist language. Ableist language could be like language refers to senses just assuming that everyone has, which is, you know, the ability to see, to hear. We also think about incorporating diverse perspectives and experiences. So that is stories or quotes from individuals of different backgrounds, also different representations in visual content. So like images displaying users of all ranges, both young and old. And we also have to think about language barriers as well. So producing copy in a way that people whose first language is not the one they're reading can clearly understand. So that means avoiding any idioms such as, for example, over the moon. You know, many people might not know if they're just learning English that means happy or delighted. And the reason why I mention English there is because many people learn English as a second language and therefore consume content through English. But this actually applies to any language. So whether it's German, French, or Spanish, you should always be aware that a user might be consuming this language and it might be their second language. And lastly, again, depending on the company, a content designer will also be the bridge between product and localization. So that is where you want to take your product and internationalize it and make it fit into other target locales. So if you look at local cultures, content designers look at researching the target audience for that local culture, and they look at the cultural context, and they attempt to create a locally resonating content that is easier to translate. And while they don't translate it, they do factor translation into their minds. So spreading the word as well, they provide guidance on localization best practices and make sure that these are baked both into the style guide and the design system. So they act as kind of like a go-between between, say, product and localization and the rest of the company in general. And they basically bring design, engineering, and localization together. So sometimes this means even creating the translation keys and providing additional context to localization teams for translations. And content also plays a role in the information architecture, as I mentioned. So this means contributing to also the general content hierarchy and the structure of information that you see in the UI. So how this looks like is content design often performs heavy research to identify the concepts and information most crucial to user and business goals. And we work on linking these concepts together. And we also work with UX designers to ensure that the information architecture is aligned with the overall journey. And often it involves making adjustments to content structure or layout to improve navigation. This also feeds into content hierarchy and structure in the UI, because identifying key content is essential for the user to understand and interact with the UI effectively. So we look at things like labels, buttons, headings. We also prioritize content based on user needs, and we order it accordingly. We organize content logically by grouping related items, and we also ensure layout of the UI adequately accommodates the content. So that brings me on to my next important topic. Now that we've kind of examined the bigger picture of the way that content design brings value to an organization, I think it's important now to look at UX writing and the differences between that and content design. So many people see UX writing and content design as being synonymous, and they're actually not. And to be honest, I couldn't blame you if you do see that as being the case, because there's so many different terms now bandied about. But and this is kind of like a profession that is growing very rapidly. But in short, UX writing is not necessarily content design. UX writing is something that content designers do, and you can also have people or professions dedicated specifically to content design. And I see yes, so Olivia, yeah. Many people get confused by this term, it's true, or by these two terms. Sadly enough, I see it happening a lot in the industry that many UX writers actually do the work of content designers. So they do all of what we just discussed, and they are in effect content designers, but their title is UX writing. So the industry always sometimes takes a while to catch up, but I have seen this, the word content designer being used more and more in organizations, thankfully. But still, UX writing is a crucial component of content design. So let's examine what UX writing is. So I suppose the best way to start looking at what UX writing is to look at what it's not. And it's not marketing copy, in that A person who does UX writing isn't trying to persuade the user, or they're not trying to sell anything. It's also not technical writing, because sometimes this gets confused with it as well. So when a UX writer isn't concerned with writing manuals, you know, that's what a technical writer does. Instead, UX writing helps to deliver on the promise of marketing along with the rest of design. So yeah, it's a useful way to think of it. Marketing makes a promise, and then the rest of the company, engineering, design, delivers on that promise. And UX writing works to make a product more intuitive. It's concerned with flows and context. And that's very important, because you cannot look ever at just one screen or one part of the screen in isolation. You have to see the overall flow. It's influenced heavily by how the user interacts with the product, or is expected to interact with the product. It's related to other elements in the UI. So think of buttons, think of icons. A person doing UX writing has to consider how all of these items work together. And lastly, it meets the user in a variety of situations. So the user might be using your app anywhere. You know, they might be on the train, they might be at home in the living room, they might be walking out in nature, they might be really frustrated, or they might be overjoyed. So you have to meet the user in all kinds of situations. Now, something that I thought would be good to talk about would be the Doherty threshold. So you're probably all very familiar with this UX design law. So its productivity soars when a computer and its users interact at a pace of less than 400 milliseconds that ensures neither has to wait on the other. So I think UX writing aligns very closely to this. And it highlights really well what a UX writer is attempting to do. So UX writing should help the user use the product as close as possible to the speed of thought. And we provide just enough help, or just enough to help the user along, and then we get out of their way. And that is such an important part of what UX writing is about. Any word that doesn't improve the user's experience shouldn't be in the UI. And UX writers, unlike say marketers, UX writers know they've been more successful when their UI copy goes unnoticed. So if you think about someone who produces marketing copy, they're thinking, well, I really want this to get noticed. If people look at this and they talk about it, I've been successful. UX writing is the polar opposite of that. If people are noticing your copy, it's because it's getting in the way. So yeah, to help us with this Doherty's law, we've got some common UX writing rules, which you've probably heard before. So we've got clear, concise, consistent, useful. And I've also added an extra one, and that is front-loaded. So front-loaded basically means that you're getting to the point, you're showing the most important information first. So this could be in titles, it could be even at the sentence level. So making sure that the most important information appears as soon in the sentence as possible. So if we look at an example here of an Apple Watch app, in the first example, we're seeing like a lot of redundancy, okay? And in the second example, it says exactly the same thing, but is way more concise. And how this works is this offer, we don't need to say that because we know that it's an offer already. We don't need to say automatically, that's redundant, because the fact that it expires in 2 days implies that it's automatic. It's also front loaded because the most important information is that this offer expires, and then secondary to that is when it expires, which is in 2 days. So as you can see, there's a lot of thought that actually goes behind each word that ends up on the screen. And then that brings us to another very important part of UX writing and content design as a whole, and that is brand voice versus tone of voice. And again, these two are often misunderstood. It's no biggie if they are, because it's still usually when people talk about this, they more or less mean the same thing. But just to give you an example, let's say a company's brand voice is casual, direct, and friendly. So this casual, direct, and friendly brand voice would be mapped to various situations, which would produce alternate tones. So taking the typical error message as an example, let's say with our casual, direct, and friendly brand voice, if we said, "We are sorry, but your details cannot be loaded at this moment due to a server issue. We're currently looking into the issue, but in the meantime, you can try to refresh the page or attempt it again later." So this is apologetic, it's empathetic, but it doesn't quite match. That tone doesn't quite match with the brand voice of casual, direct, and friendly. So instead, we will continue with the apologetic and empathetic angle, but instead we'll write, we're sorry, we couldn't load your details right now because of a server issue, but we're on it. Try refreshing the page or check back later. So I'm going to pause there now. And I'm just going to ask the people attending, is that clear in any way? That distinction? Yeah. Okay, good.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, and yeah, there's another example here as well, because everyone likes to use the typical error message. Consider a situation where you might want to congratulate the user. So instead of congratulations, you have succeeded, you'd write you aced it, ready to go. So it's like the same celebratory tone, but it's aligned to the brand voice of casual, direct, and friendly. So we've discussed an awful lot there in like a small amount of time. I've been talking an awful lot there. Even, listen, let me tell you, even professionals with a lot of experience working in this industry, it's very difficult to always remember everything, you know, stuff is easily forgotten. So therefore it can be helpful to work with checklists, and I've included a UX writing checklist and a localization checklist in the digital gift bag. So yeah, these are just handy things to keep about, just to make sure if you are writing UI copy on your own, or yeah, this will basically help you just to remember everything. So that brings us on to one of the major underlying themes of this whole talk, and that is, what's a content first approach anyway? So looking at Amazon Prime without any content at all, right? So I just need to pause for water. Does that look like you could navigate it easily? No, not at all. But take this well-known digital product. I'm just curious to see, does anyone on this call actually recognize what product it might be from? It's a well-known digital product that probably most people in attendance use.
Spotify?
Spotify?
Yeah, absolutely, 100%. Yeah. So
this is also home search. Your library is almost exactly Google Music as well, YouTube Music.
Yep, mental models as well arising there. So, but the fact that people were able to say Spotify first shows just how powerful content is, because just from looking at the words, you're able to immediately recognize even the product. So navigating the product with words is possible, but navigating it without them is not possible. So it just, I wanted to use this example to show that even with just words, you could easily find your recently played music. You can find your liked songs very easily. And in fact, the British government on their website are actually, they're usually very good with their content. They know exactly how to test their content, and they pioneered a method actually of stripping the everything. So they just have the words and they strip all of the UI away, and they often test their content with the users that way. And if they're able to navigate just using the content alone, that's actually a brilliant way of testing whether or not the content is usable. So content design or collaboration between content design and product design is crucial in order to have a usable content or a usable product with content that works for the user. Now, this is often like, well, this could be taken from a day in the life of any content designer or any UX writer, right? So, you know, we often have lots of people coming to us asking us to make it shorter, asking us to describe really complex topics in 2 words, saying, oh, we just need you to write, you know, 15 lines of copy for this screen. You know, it's only 15 lines, everyone can write. It's going to take like 5 minutes, just chill. And then we also get people giving out personal opinions like, well, you know, I just don't like it and all of this. So, you know, we constantly have to work with, I suppose, feedback, which of course everyone has to work with. Yeah, absolutely. It is the most infuriating feedback, Devon. And the reason why it's infuriating is because it's not based on data. Okay, it's not aligned towards user needs. It's not aligned towards business goals. What a UX writer or content designer really values in terms of feedback is feedback regarding technical constraints, regarding user research, user data, the business goals we're trying to achieve, and also whether or not something is in scope for a certain sprint. And finally, the point that I wanted to make with this meme is that a lot of this kind of stuff just goes against how effective content design works anyway. So one of the things I wanted to talk about was the double diamond model. So writing is actually really similar to design, and it's similar in the sense that we also have this convergence and divergence of ideas, and also when it comes to writing iterations, we have this convergence and divergence. And that's why this doesn't work. So yeah, you must bring a content designer to your project before any UI design work begins. And the reason is because you can't fix bad design or poor engineering solutions with words. You know, it just doesn't work. So yeah. If you bring a content designer in after the design has started, they're more limited in the range of solutions they can bring to the table, because otherwise you're trying to squeeze content into a design that simply wasn't made for it, or it wasn't thought for it. And yeah, lorem ipsum is one of content design's biggest enemies, of course, because it just defeats the whole point of a content first approach. The reason is that, let's say your users are coming for the content, right? But you're focusing on the design, and then the content just fleshes out the design, right? So if they're coming for the content, it makes sense for the design to be built around that content. And this is not in any way to limit a product designer's work or anything like that, because content is very important to what a product designer does on a day-to-day basis. But if you get the perfect collaboration between a content designer and a product designer, you've got a product made in heaven. Relatable to designers 100%, Rich says. So going back to this double diamond model, how it could be applied to a content design scenario is that we spend the first part of the diamond trying to uncover and define important concepts to the user experience. So at this stage, the content is best represented in concepts. Okay, so at this point, we're not trying to find like terms or words. We're not thinking about even sentences at this point. We're just thinking purely of what is the information that the user needs. And then we're defining that. We're exploring everything, we're surfacing everything in the research, and then we're defining it. And then in the second part, we start to experiment. So we start to riff out different bits of content. We start to play around with the layouts. Where should this be? At this point, wireframing is incredibly helpful, and we'll often work with product designers at this stage. And then finally, we will create we'll create the content for a high fidelity prototype that we can then test with users. Sometimes we might even test it in the wireframing stage, or we might just test content on its own. But it all starts with ideation and then finishes with producing the final content. And that brings me finally to how to actually collaborate practically. So working in Figma together yields the best results, basically. Content designers and UX writers often have to carry out their work in Figma to be effective. And the reason is that writing UI copy in spreadsheets just doesn't work, because you're removing the person from the context. So they can't see where this copy is going to go. They don't understand what came before that. They don't understand what action the user is going to take after that. And then writing UI copy through Figma comments, I probably don't need to explain why that's not such a great idea long term, because you're just going to be copying and pasting. You can't really see whether or not it works in context either. So for best results, you should always give your content designers and UX writers editing access to Figma files. Of course, content designers and UX writers will have varying degrees of UI design skills, but most of them will be comfortable working with layers, and they'll have basic text editing skills such as alignment. And if they are just starting out, and because it is still a relatively new profession, well, it's always existed, but it's relatively newly recognized, and they're not that confident, you can teach them basic skills, which for you are very simple, and it will make both of your lives easier. So there are a few different ways that you can go about actually collaborating in Figma itself, in your files. So if you're afraid of something being broken in your design, you can duplicate the screens. That's an option. It's actually personally my favorite option, and I'll get to why in a moment. If they're not familiar with certain actions, such as auto layout or detaching instances from components, again, showing them will make everyone's life easier. And it takes just a couple of clicks. You can also consider turning strings into components. And the reason for that is, let's say that you duplicate some screens and they make some changes to some strings or whatever, they add new strings. If everything is componentized, then you can make changes across multiple screens very easily. And I did check if componentized is a word as well before. Apparently it is. It's a new word. So yeah, alternatively, you can use a plugin like Find and Replace. I included that in the goodie bag that we have at the end, to make multiple changes if componentizing the strings doesn't work. And then of course another option is to create branched files. Branched files. That's so clever about language strings. Yes, yeah, it does tend to work really well, because you just change it once and then the title is changed across like 200 screens. It's a lifesaver. But yeah, you can also do the branch thing. I personally didn't really like the branching method so much. So I would create branches and then there would be lots of people working in a file. There'd be updates, but it generally tended to be quite messy because people didn't know what each other was working on. So what I prefer to do instead is duplicate the screens and have it side by side to what the product designer is working on. That way the product designer can see exactly what I'm working on and vice versa, I can see what they're working on. And if you create components for the strings, or if you use a Find and Replace plugin, it's fine. It reduces manual work. Okay, I've repeated some text there, but no worries. If we look to the second part, wireframing is a great way to collaborate, and it just is the best. If your content designer at all is comfortable with wireframing, it means that they can actually choose the best layout for the content, and as a product designer you can guide them through that process. And yeah, again, match made in heaven. So if you show your content designer how to access your design system, and even better again, if you have like a wireframing kit, then they can put together their suggestions pretty easily. And sometimes maybe if they're not comfortable using Figma at all, they can always sketch as well and then upload a photo to the canvas. So yeah, that brings us to the end of our presentation, and yeah, we can start the QA now, and I'll be happy to answer any questions anyone has.
That was fantastic, man. Really, really brilliant.
Oh, thank you, Mitch. I'm glad you enjoyed it.
Thoroughly enjoyed. Yeah. Very cool. So how much of your day is spent on how much of your day is spent on text content versus any other kind of content? Do you find a lot of you're doing a lot more audio and writing for audio and writing for video, or is it predominantly written word that you're dealing with at the moment?
Yeah, for me, it's predominantly written word.
And
even when it
Hmm?
Oh, go ahead. I think there was a bit of delay there.
Sorry, and then in terms of social media, do you spend a lot of time doing social media, or are you predominantly working on product?
Yeah, so in my particular job, I'm always working on product, and I'm always usually working with text, with I suppose layouts for data displays, and I'm every day. Surprisingly enough, I'm not working on UI copy. I will spend a lot of time typically researching things. I might spend time doing activities which don't immediately impact the product. So that might mean working on terminology, preparing tests for terminology. It might imply working on style guides, and but yes, I mostly do work with UI copy as well. I see Olivian in the chat is asking me, do I recommend any books? Yes, I was thinking about including some books in this. I haven't got any right now, but I have a long list of books that I could recommend indeed. I'll leave a list in this file afterwards. Or I can drop it in the Discord as well, yes. Yeah, I think I have too many favorite books to recommend at this point.
I wanted to ask you another one. So that process is really interesting what you do. I've never thought about it. I just like normally I have to do the copywriting. I suppose I'm a UI designer, and normally it's down to me for some reason. And I just kind of go, oh yeah, that sounds about right. That's the kind of tone we're going for. But you're telling me that there's a whole research process. Like, I need to know more.
Yeah. So again, I guess we can always paste the link to these this Discord channel. I'm actually not in the Discord channel yet, but yeah, I'd like to join it. Yeah, there is a whole research process. So what can help with copy is just any research that you have about your user, anything that you know at all. So what I find personally that helps me is the personas. So any kind of data you have on your user, if you can create like a persona for them, then you have someone in your mind that you can imagine that you're talking to, right? So for me, that is something that helps a lot. And then when you are writing the UI copy, you also want to know if this is actually helping the user get their task done. So if you carry out user testing, you can check to see, does this, are they able to complete the task with, say, a certain CTA, any kind of descriptive text or any helper text that you have in the UI, does this hinder them in any way? Do they ask questions about what it means? And you can even ask them, you know, do you understand what this means? It's as simple as that. I'm not sure exactly what your situation is or how much you know, how much research you often have to go on, because I do understand, you know, depending on the size of the company, you might have to conduct your own research, or you might have a department dedicated to research. So yeah, what kind of situation you're in?
It is currently me and the product lead doing the research.
Yes. So in the same way that you use research to help you with design, you would also use it to help you with the copy. But are you having difficulties translating that research to the copy?
So not with this project just yet, but it's definitely something that I've struggled with in other projects. I specialize in working with startups. So yeah, there's not enough resource usually for research. And
if we go back to the Spotify example, Mitch there pointed out that a lot of the words there would also be in YouTube Music. So we look for words that people would be used to. So we benchmark in that way. But there's also, with the research we have, like again, going with the example of the user persona, there is an activity that that I actually wanted to do at the end of this presentation, which is kind of like an ideation or a brainstorming activity to really look at the kind of language that a user would use. But yeah, we have our own kind of benchmarking, and yeah, we do look for other types of patterns in products. I hope that helps.
100%, that was really clear. Thank you.
Hello, I have a question. This is more specifically in terms of localization. So moving away from your first language of a product to another language, or having multi-language support. If you do have a bit of experience with this, what kind of processes do you use to quality control other languages? Because of course, if you don't speak that language, you kind of lose control over the tone of voice and certain things, particularly in English, where our language is quite unstructured in ways. How do you make sure that the message still comes across in a way that's both in the spirit of the original messaging, but also potentially sensitive to different regions, and how that comes across?
Yeah, so that's a great question. And firstly, it depends on the size of the company that you're in. So like, let's say if you're a freelancer, right, it's obviously going to be more difficult. If you're in a company that's quite large and it has its own localization department, then you would be, if we go with this example first, you would be like the I guess the bridge between product and localization, in that you would be informing the localization team, okay, so this is the tone that we want to go for. Here is our style guide. You know, it's going to be casual, it's going to be friendly, it's going to be direct, and we want to try and reproduce this in the target audience. But we will also be aware at the same time exactly what cultures we're trying to fit into, because they may not be exactly the same as the original culture that we're designing for. So we'll also take that into account, and we'll also work closely with the localization team to make sure that the same experience is reproduced in other languages and other contexts. And now that won't always be the case. You won't always have a dedicated localization team, and you may have to outsource it. And again, it's a similar kind of structure. You want to make sure that you provide the translator with all of the information they need. So it's not just like, hey, here's the text, translate it. You'll want to provide screens, you'll want to provide context, and you'll also want to provide the style guide, so that you make sure that that language is being reproduced in the correct tone of voice, and that the brand shines through. And yes, if you're a freelancer, then I guess that in that case, yeah, you wouldn't be necessarily responsible for the localization, but you would still want to ensure that the company that you're working for, or the client that you're working for, passes these guidelines on to whoever is outsourcing their localization. Does that kind of answer your question?
Yeah, it's a good frame of reference to have, because I think it's going to be a challenge. Unfortunately, we fell into the trap of doing the UI before some of the content, so already now I'm sweating over like certain components which I know are absolutely going to break with new languages being introduced. So there's challenges ahead. Yeah, it's like hindsight is a great thing. You're really selling content design as a full-time profession in itself, like, for sure. I think it's probably undervaluing it in design.
Yeah, absolutely. And also, from what you're saying there, it sounds like you may be having like spacing issues. So like where you have to translate English into languages that are normally longer. So like, let's say if you're translating English into German or Spanish, which generally tend to have longer sentences, longer words. A good thing is to introduce into your style guide a rule which makes it easier for localization. So it could be like English should always be like 70% of a space. So you should always leave 30% extra space for translations in longer languages. And so, yeah, these are ways that you can start to kind of think about already translating into other languages while you're still in the design process.
That's a great tip.
That's a really good point. Sorry, Mitch.
No, go for it. You first.
I was just going to say, at my last company, everything had to be bilingual, English and French. So we would do designs and leave space for French, because they're like, oh, we'll just slot it in afterwards. Such a pain in the hole, because the French was constantly 30% longer.
Yeah.
And they're like, just design it and we'll put French in afterwards. And I'm like, no.
Yeah, we have a rule on Switched On Fiber, which is the main product that I'm working on, which is everything has to work in German, because German has these insanely long words that also can't be sort of broken between two lines.
Yeah.
And that tends to work quite well. I wanted to ask you, have you ever dealt with any languages that go from right to left, or anything crazy like that?
No. I mean, yeah, that's a very good question. I've also not dealt with any kind of language. Yeah, I've never dealt with any languages that use different characters or anything like that. But yeah, it is definitely a very interesting area for study. I have come across websites that have been bilingual in that sense. But yes, it would absolutely change a lot of things. It would change the layout of content, everything, because if we take the typical F pattern, which users normally scan content in, so they go from left to right and then downwards, and then they scan left to right a bit less. That would be like, I guess, the inverse from a right to left language. So yeah, you would have to kind of apply the same concepts, but in reverse.
That's interesting. I haven't seen a lot of examples of sort of Arabic web design or books or anything. It sounds interesting. I'd love to see that research to see if the F is the other way around, or if there's some other anomaly that comes about. Yeah,
I have seen some that like blogs that talk about UX design, and can't remember the name, but I might drop it on the canvas when I do. But generally what I've seen is that they try to imitate the Western style, so they go from everything's kind of left to right, So even like the translations are, but it is an interesting area for study because yeah, I'm not sure how you would, if you wanted to have a localized website, how you would differentiate these two languages. This is where my experience kind of fades now. So if anyone else on the call has any experience with that, yeah, happy to hear about it.
Everybody's going to be toggling the language settings on every website they see from now on.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, be an interesting exploration for sure.
I do love the idea, and I've kind of, you know, if I mean, as designers, we probably all have this experience of some relative comes to us and says, you know, I have this business idea and I'd love for you to make me a website for free. That, you know, the first thing that I've learned to say is, come back to me 3 months from now when you have some content, right? Because you're going to make it, and then they're going to realize that they actually have no idea what to write on their website. They need to go and build that out first, before we even start working on it.
Yeah.
So yeah, I do appreciate that approach of don't put lorem ipsum in. You know, that's the most important part. You can't just yada yada the main point of the website, right? That is the website. Everything else is just sort of fluff. You know?
Exactly. Yeah. It's like, oh, I want to design a website. Yeah, but what's the website going to be about? Why are they going to come?
Exactly.
They'll come for the beautiful design.
Yeah, they're not.
Well,
They're not.
yeah, the colors, the graphics.
Yeah, they're not coming for the sexy headers and footers. Like, that's not why they're there.
Are there any more questions? If not, we might just head over to the activity that we had planned. Yeah.
Awesome.
Okay, great. All right. So yeah, everyone can still see my screen. Perfect.
Yeah.
Okay. So when it comes to collaboration between, you know, content design or product design, there's actually lots of different ways that we can go about it, right? There's lots of different techniques, and some will work better than others depending on the kind of situation that you're in. But there was one that I wanted to do for the purpose of this call. So yes, if everyone just clicks onto the link there that Mitch shared in the chat. This conversation mapping is a really great form of ideation when you're just designing a new feature and you're not quite sure how this feature should look. So I'm just going to walk you through this conversation mapping. It's actually based off conversational design, and it's basically like you're designing a chatbot, but you're not actually designing a chatbot. You're pretending it's a chatbot, and it's it takes like a Wizard of Oz format, and what you're actually doing is trying to see the language that the user uses, and also trying to decipher the most logical way to present the information. So here what I've done is I've created a chat or a conversation between a user who's called Alan, right, and Budgie, which is going to be a budgeting app. And so this is assuming that we have our research on our user persona, and our user persona is Alan. We know all about him. He's a store assistant. He often burns through his paychecks every month, and he wants to start saving up. He wants to manage his spending. So what I've done is I've just mapped out a chat between him and Budgie. So he's just downloaded Budgie, and Budgie says, "Hi, nice to meet you." And Alan just opens up and starts telling him all the problems he's having, you know, keeping track of his finances. And then Budgie says, "No worries, let's ask you some questions." And Budgie proceeds to ask Alan, you know, what he wants from the app. And Alan starts to tell him what he wants to do. And this is where you really start to empathize with the user. You know, what problems is he having? He doesn't know where his money is going. He doesn't know what he's spending it on. He doesn't know how much he's saving per month. Okay. And it turns out then in the chat that we need to ask him some personal questions. So already we're thinking, okay, we'll need to contact legal. We'll need legal advice for this before we start asking users to share personal information. We ask him what his salary is. We ask him how often he gets his salary, etc. And then through the chat, we work out that it would make sense for him to set a goal to save, well, a goal for a certain amount that he wants to save per month. So a lot was kind of discovered in this chat, and you might notice that I've highlighted certain things in bold, and these are like key pieces of information that would help us progress onto a wireframe. So this was basically a conversation with myself, and like doing this kind of exercise, if you're talking to yourself, that doesn't make you cray, right? That's not if it's this kind of exercise, at least. But this, it's very powerful if you do it on your own. It's also even more powerful if you do it with someone else. And often what can happen is you can have a team and you can have like a workshop, and multiple people, so multiple pairs, can have these conversations together. And it can be really useful for surfacing information, the order in which you present that information, and also the kind of language that your user might use. So seeing how this could progress, we now have like an overall picture of what Alan's going through, right? So Alan feels he has no control over his spending, and he wants to start tracking his finances. For him, this means knowing the total of percentage of his salary that he's spending every month, and also what he's spending his money on. His ultimate goal is to stop burning through each pay slip and start saving, which isn't easy during a period of high inflation. So even though Budsheet can show Alan the data he wants to see, in order to properly save, Alan needs to set realistic savings goals to work towards. So taking all of this information, we've mapped it out. We've created a content map, and we have different steps, right? So this is a very generalized situation, right? Normally you wouldn't kind of design a whole app from scratch this way, but this can be very useful for a feature. But this example is assuming starting from nothing. We do the onboarding, and then we onboard Alan, we introduce him to the app, and we show him the dashboard for this budgeting app. So yes, in this example, we have step 1, introduce user to the app's main features, which are set savings goals, track spending, see savings balance in real time. So this is where the value is coming. Then step 2 would be ask the user about their personal finance situation. So what's their salary amount? How often are they receiving the salary? Also a note there to check with legal. And then number 3 would be asking them what their goals are. Number 4 would be start loading the dashboard information. So this is the technical software engineering would have to deal with that. You'd have to liaise with them about the design and what the technical constraints are. And we also have what the dashboard would show. So it would show the total savings, total income per period, also real-time savings as well. So here, 15 days into the month, here's what you've saved so far, or here's what you haven't spent so far. And then number 5, once the user is onboarded, explain how the dashboard works. So you might have a wizard to highlight various parts of the dashboard, to show current salary, savings and goals, and also how to scan his receipts so that he can track his expenses automatically with our magical app that is able to do that. So this is just an example of how powerful this conversation mapping can be to give you an initial structure to work with. And you can very easily then take these details and start sketching out several wireframes now that you have a direction to work with. So yeah, I'm not sure if anyone present has actually worked with this method before or has seen this method in action. It'd be interesting to know, or what you think of it even.
I've never seen it, but it sounds pretty interesting. And who doesn't like talking to themselves?
Yeah, exactly.
So
I mean, you don't have to talk to yourself necessarily. It can be a colleague who's pretending to be the user of the system.
Yeah.
yes, so I mean the Wizard of Oz test is quite interesting. It's sort of the idea that instead of you want to build this automated machine that answers your questions, but you don't have that machine yet, so you put a person in its place, right? Like the Wizard of Oz. It's not really this great powerful thing. It's actually just a tiny guy behind a machine.
Exactly. Yeah.
We did this a couple of times. We found that it was really useful to sort of push the technology as far as we could to kind of say, this is the most realistic sort of conversation that you would want to have with another human being. And then that became the benchmark for the chatbot or whatever system it is that you're creating. to kind of say this is the benchmark, this is the best case scenario for your conversation. So the reason I changed, the reason I had to restart Zoom was to start breakout rooms. So if you want, we can pair up.
Yeah,
Um,
absolutely. So just to kind of give you a bit of an explanation beforehand. So yeah, again, this is in the format of a chatbot, but we're not actually creating a chatbot. What we're doing is trying to surface information. So working in different pairs in the break rooms, we will just have a chat together and see what kind of information we surface. Really easy exercise. There's nothing specific you have to say, just whatever comes naturally. That's the whole point behind this. And the scenario that you're going to be working with is not the same one. In this case, the user, whoever plays the user, has just moved from the city. They've always lived in the city their whole life. They don't know anything about gardening. They've just moved out to the suburbs or to the countryside, and they have a home with a big garden, right? And they have this massive lawn that they want to mow, and they don't know if they need a big, massive ride-on lawnmower or if a simple push lawnmower would do. Of course, they want something that's cost effective, but they also, they don't want to, they want to spend as little as possible, but they also want something that's going to reduce the manual workload for them. So yeah, you are looking to buy a lawnmower for your new big home, or big lawn anyway. So that's the situation. So one person will play the user and the other person will play the system. And just to show you how this works, so this little component here that we have, this kind of chatbot, if you select the system, you'll see here there's a switch. Okay, so you can toggle between system and user, and then you can just simply edit the content like so. Okay, and yeah, so you can easily switch between the two. So the idea is that with your partner, you will be either the system or the user, and you will just use this toggle and you will edit text here. Yeah, does anyone have any questions about that?
Do we need to like duplicate it down or just keep filling it the same ones in back and forth?
Good question. Yeah. So yeah, you need to keep duplicating it down, right? So as a simple case, anyone that's not familiar with it, you just press Command and D, okay, and then you can choose either system or user. So Command D, system or user, and then you edit the text.
This is a funny question. Would you normally verbalize? You just type it for that authentic chatbot experience?
You can verbalize it. So if your typing is so fast that it can keep up with your speech, you can absolutely verbalize it. You don't have to, or you could maybe talk with your partner, whoever you're partnered up with, and if it makes sense, then write it down. And listen, it's a bit of fun, this activity. We're not going to have time to create a content map with it. We just want to see kind of like what you come up with. That's all.
So we're not getting a grade.
No.
Yeah.
Okay,
Cool.
so how many users are in the call?
I've got 2 breakout rooms, and then 2 can stay in this room.
Okay.
So it's gonna be assigned shortly. Let me open the rooms.
Do we need to duplicate the components?
No, I think we're good because we've got 3. There's 3 teams, so it actually works perfectly.
Excellent.
Cool. So see if you can jump into the assigned room. So I see Devin and Megan, room 1, and Jamie and Joe, you guys are in room 2, and then Olivia and myself, I guess, will be staying here.
Where are rooms? Is that a dumb question? How do I get there?
No, it's not a dumb question. Is that something that you see on your... No?
I don't see anything. It usually comes up to join.
Oh, okay.
Oh, okay. I might have to manually move you. Sorry, I haven't done this in a while. Let me see if I can move you. No. Oh,
I don't feel very moved by
no. No, you're not. Oh. you guys not seeing it at all? That sucks.
Nope.
Oh, the classic breakout room conundrum. It's still software's biggest enemy.
The first time I did, yeah, breakout rooms, I nearly had a panic attack. I was just like, I hope it's going to be ready. Hope it's going to be ready.
I know it's not a massive deal.
It'll be
if it
ready
doesn't
in
work.
testing and it'll fail
Yeah, that's right.
on live, regardless. So we
Yeah.
could always just mute on the chat and work in our pairs on the
On
Yeah.
Slack or on Discord. That sounds like a good idea. That's a really good idea. Let's do that. So we'll mute here and then contact your person either on Slack or on Discord. And Olivia, you're a fan of Discord, yes?
Big fan.
Grand. Okay, I'll get you there.
Perfect.
and where are you, Megan?
I have Discord as well. I'll write hello.
I am on Slack. So
Oh, okay.
our first hiccup. I do not have Discord on this computer.
Okay. My Slack will probably take me a few minutes to open. What you were saying though is that we could like mute here and then have the real chatbot experience like
Yeah, that's
on the
kind of what I was
screen
going for.
together, all together. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. Unless you would like to hear my voice, I'm happy to mute and just chatbot it with you.
There we go. Sorry about that, everyone. We're still on the huddle in Slack.
Got to hear my voice in monstrous proportions.
So, is everyone finished? I see we already have like quite a lot of chat going on, and thought it would be a cool exercise just to compare like the different chats and see what kind of information we managed to surface. So, Devin and Megan, would you like to take us through yours?
Well, we just connected on Slack like just now. I've never actually been on one before, so I think it's really cute that it's called a huddle. So I just learned that. So we didn't
Would
get
that be
super
UX
far.
writing?
Yeah, we didn't get super far on it, but I'm probably not the best lawnmower salesperson, but I actually have worked in a hardware place before that I had to sell them, so I thought that I'd know more, but
Well, I know nothing about lawnmowers, so we were a great team. We had fun.
I see that you talked about it's interesting. You talked about sizes and colors, whereas yeah, Jamie and myself didn't touch on those topics at all. We had other topics. So it's interesting just to see you know, which teams surface or which pairs surface different information that might be relevant. So thanks very much for your input there, Olivia and Mitch. And what did you come up with?
So we had a lot of conversation, but I don't know if I got as far as recommending something just yet. But we had this chat where basically we had this interesting moment where she really wanted to give me lots of information all at once.
Right.
And in a kind of automated system, that's actually really difficult for the automated system to deal with, right? They usually want answers like, I've got these 4 categories, right? I want you to answer based on these 4 categories. So when you come back with something, so you know, she answered D, perfect for the system, right?
Yeah.
Not very human for the user. When she responds with 2 things at once, it can sort of it can be difficult for the user, for the system. But that's a really natural way for the user to write. And the one thing we mentioned was, you know, these kinds of systems are getting better and better, and they're getting more competent with this concept of you're writing a sentence and it's actually about two different things, and it can sort of deal with that. But yeah, I was about to recommend a particular tractor model based on her size of garden and her medical needs. That's as far as we got.
That's a
Yeah,
really
the
interesting
system was oh, sorry, Joe, go ahead.
No, you go ahead. Yeah.
I was going to say the system was a bit laggy. I can't lie. No, so yeah, that was a really interesting point that Mitch made. And also, whenever I wrote "Let's Saddle Up," he said, well, the system probably wouldn't understand that, which, yeah, right enough, it generally doesn't if you're using something like intercom.
Yeah, and we would hope that one day they would get jokes, but right now most of these things don't get jokes.
Yeah. Well, I think it's a really interesting thing that you surfaced the medical conditions, because it is something that's very relevant. You know, someone can't use a push lawnmower if they have back problems, or it's, you know, they probably won't want to use one. So that would actually be a very interesting way of helping the user filter between categories and find the product that's right for them. I'll make one comment that the overall goal of this exercise is actually not even to think about systems. So it's to kind of start brainstorming before you even think about the design or how the design could look. So that's kind of the beauty about this. And when I worked with product designers in the past using this method, they would always respond with, if they played the system, they would respond with, okay, click here to go here. And I'm like, no, forget the UI, forget all the UI elements. It's just literally a conversation. And then, of course, yeah, in the past, other people thought we were like designing a chatbot. I'm like, no, it's not. It's not a chatbot. It's simply just we're trying to surface information, and we're also at the same time looking to see like how the user might phrase certain things. It's basically an exercise in empathizing with the user persona, and yeah, understanding like how they might expect information to be presented to them. But it's really cool that you surface this this interesting question about the medical conditions. And yeah, for myself and Jamie, you know, we were looking at we were kind of looking at, again, like what's the size of the lawn, because you know, the purchase will depend on this. And Jamie was telling us about the size of it, and I was saying he was saying he doesn't know much about lawnmowers. I asked him, are you a techie guy? Because we also have robotic lawnmowers as well. And then we were discussing price, and then Jamie wanted to throw me a curveball, and he wanted to say he's in Adamstown. I actually don't know where that is, but this is also a very important thing as well, like where is the user based? And maybe this could bring about a need for the system to get the user's location somehow, to work out if deliveries are possible. So yeah, it's basically to examine all of these possibilities. So that is one out of many different content design collaboration techniques. I hope you found it useful, or at the very least fun, and I'd like to thank you for taking part in it as well. Yeah, I hope you got something from it. I've included in the resources, so I know that Friends of Figma Dublin has a digital gift bag. So yeah, on this pink square up here, I've included the checklists, and you can go through the checklists, and for example, if you satisfy certain points or not, you can select checked or unchecked in the variants, and you can do the same for localization. And I've included this conversation mapping component there. I've also included like a table which is useful for organizing information as you surface it in chats. So if you ever want to use that or try that system one day or experiment with it, you can do. I've also added some I think it's possible the background must have moved a bit, but I have some links to useful plugins as well that you can use. So for example, Writer lets you implement a style guide, so it makes real-time suggestions in Figma when a product designer or someone else is creating copy that goes against the style guide rules. It advises them to use it. It also implements terms to ensure consistency. So when a content designer or UX writer can't be there policing everything, it does that for you automatically. Things like Google Sheets sync, so you can import Figma data tables. Then you've got things like Fontitude, which does the same thing as Writer. I've also put down whether or not they're free or if they're paid. Find and Replace, also a really useful plugin. Phrase Strings is kind of like it's like a well-known localization management tool, a bit expensive, so it depends on the organization that you're in. Mapsicle helps you put maps or use real maps in your mockups or prototypes. And Content Reel is a Microsoft plugin, and that helps you kind of gather sort of just it helps you generate random data, avatar photos and stuff like that. And yeah, that brings us to the end of this What the Fig is Content First Design chats. Really hope you enjoyed it.
Amazing, Joe. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for all your hard work on this. This is an incredible amount of work you put into this. And this is by far, I think, the best gift bag we have with actual usable things that you guys are welcome to copy and use as you like. So yeah, well done, man. Really great.
Well, thank you. I'm glad you enjoyed it.
Yes, and I'm
Very
glad.
much so. Thank you.
Yeah, it was really good.
It was brilliant. Thank you so much.
Awesome. We hope you'll stay part of the gang and keep coming to these whenever you're free. We're going to have another one on the 1st of June. I actually won't be here on the 1st of June because I will get murdered because it's my wife's birthday. So Jamie is going to be hosting that one.
Yes.
Are you guys like the Figma ambassadors, the Friends of Figma ambassadors?
Yes, I'm the Friends of Figma advocate. Jamie is also a co-organizer, as is Devon.
Yes.
And
Background support.
yeah, and we have, it's like you have to be an advocate for a year and then you can pass it on to someone else. But yeah, it's not paid. We don't get money. They don't pay us. We don't pay them. It's just like help people, find people who are interested.
100%.
Yeah,
build
like a
the
meetup
community,
group, I guess.
like a support group.
Yeah.
It ain't
Yeah,
easy,
thank you
but
so
someone's
much,
gonna do
Joe.
it.
Yeah,
You're welcome. I'm glad you got something from it.
very much so.
Thanks
We'll
so
have you
much,
back for
guys.
part 2.
Yeah, I'd
Have
love
a
to have
good
a part 2. Cheers, guys.
Okay, thanks everyone.
Bye.
So,
Have a great evening. Bye.
bye.